Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And as always, I'd like to thank the following people that helped me out, sending me a lot of this. It's so critical to me, so thank you very much. And that would be Barrett Peterson, Jason Dance, Chris Fellong, Jacqueline Wolf, and Dragos Stanetschu. I hope I pronounced that correctly. That's new this week. Thank you guys so much. I'll give you a shout out on my radio show in the next couple of days as well. Let's get started because there's a lot of ground to cover here, and we're heading to the South Australian government for an update. I first reported on this one in mid-November, but we now have actual numbers for this one, and the number of records accessed by the attackers corresponds to at least 38,000 South Australian government employees, but it could be as high as 80,000 according to South Australia's treasurer, Rob Lucas. Obviously, that's a pretty big breach for South Australia. I will keep you up to date as that continues on. Moving on, let's talk about Volvo. That's right, Swedish car maker Volvo has disclosed that an unknown attacker or attackers have stolen research and development information after hacking some of its own servers. While the company did not disclose any other details, essentially the Snatch ransomware gang is already claiming attack. The ransomware the gang added an entry into their leak site on November 30th about breaching Volvo and essentially stealing files, and they've been slowly releasing data since. So hopefully Volvo will get that cleaned up. Moving on, let's talk about massive ISP Cox Communication. They disclosed a data breach after an attacker impersonated a support agent to gain access to customers' personal information. And basically, here we are. Customers this past week began receiving letters in the mail disclosing that Cox Communication learned on October 11th of this year that, quote, an unknown persons impersonated a Cox support agent to access customer information. Now, there's not a lot of details right now about this incident, but the attacker likely used a social engineering attack to gain access to Cox's internal systems that provided information about customers. So if you're a Cox customer, heads up to you, look out for those letters. They're probably not junk mail this round. Moving on, let's talk about Confluence and GitLab, specifically the servers that are running Confluence and GitLab, because over the past few days, a week or so, a ransomware gang has leveraged exploits for recently disclosed vulnerabilities to gain access to these unpatched servers, encrypt the files, then obviously ask for a boatload of money. Now, the attacks were spotted by security researcher, the research team, Malware Hunter team, and Tencent Security, and both have basically seen hundreds of servers hit so far, with both Windows and Linux systems and infrastructure being encrypted. This is why we update. If you have Confluence or GitLab and you're hosting that on internal servers in your infrastructure, make sure it's up to date. We have to make sure we're patching everything, including Linux. A lot of people don't, and that's unfortunate. Moving on, let's talk about 300 plus sites that are essentially e-commerce stores, because threat actors have abused a legitimate feature of the Google Tag Manager service to secretly add and deploy malicious JavaScript code to more than 300 e-commerce stores since March of this year. It looks like a Mage Cart hit, in the sense that it was essentially skimming credit card information, which is why you hit an e-commerce site anyway, and most of the compromised sites were small online store operations. Only one had enough traffic to basically make it into the Alexa rankings top 50,000, according to researchers. So if you're running a small e-commerce store, you might want to have it checked out just in case you're not caught up in Mage Cart, thanks to Google Tag Manager. Moving on, let's talk about the telehealth app Doxy.me. They're fixing an issue that allowed 3 third-party firms to access the names of some patient providers. The company, which self-reports as holding 30% of the growing U.S. telemedicine market field and is currently used by over 1 million providers worldwide, appears to also be sharing IP addresses and unique device identification information with Google, Facebook, and the marketing software company HubSpot. So that's awesome. The sensitive user data was accessible when patients clicked on a link in the platform's quote-unquote virtual waiting room service, which connects patients with medical professionals. Providers can choose the name of their waiting room, which is often their name or the name of their medical practice. And this is all being scraped by Google, Facebook, and HubSpot. And if you've watched me or listened to me before, you know what I think about data mining, about Google and Facebook. Let's throw HubSpot onto that pile this week. Moving on. let's talk about the Ministry of Health for the country of Brazil. The websites for the health ministry and the Conecta SUS platform, which centralizes vaccination data and other health information for Brazilians countrywide, was taken down by attackers in the early hours of Friday. Now, both platforms were still down as of Friday noon Brazilian time after this attack. Early in the morning, when trying to access the ministry website, users only saw a black screen with a message that read, and I quote, "The internal data of the systems were copied and deleted. 50 terabytes of data is in our hands. Contact us if you want the data back," followed by an email address and a link to a Telegram channel. So obviously, this is a ransomware hit. That's all I've got right now. But heads up, if you're Brazilian, your Ministry of Health was just compromised. Moving on, let's talk about Spar markets and petrol stations in the United Kingdom. Spar has had more than 300 of its convenience stores in the UK affected by a ransomware attack, which has forced some to actually close their doors or only accept cash payments. In the interim, the cyber attack, which first struck basically this past weekend, was confirmed to involve a ransomware on Tuesday afternoon, and it not only shut down convenience stores, but also prevented the public from fueling at those petrol stations. So if you've got a Spar in your local neighborhood in the UK somewhere, heads up to you. They may still be out. Moving on, let's talk about Nordic Choice Hotels. They discovered a virus attack that occurred on December 2nd of this year. It affected the hotel chain's IT systems used to handle reservations, check-ins, check-outs, and creation of new room keys, according to essentially their prepared statement. The Conti ransomware gang is claiming responsibility on their leak site, and that's all we have thus far. So if you made a reservation at Nordic Choice Hotels or you've stayed there, you might want to check in. Hopefully, you're not compromised. Moving on, let's talk about the Australian electricity provider CS Energy. They got ransomwared basically on November 27th, and CS Energy said that this ransomware compromised devices on their corporate network. Safety and operations at its Cogan Creek and Callide power stations were not impacted, nor was power generation and delivery. So hopefully, it's self-contained and no customer information was essentially taken. CS Energy is owned by Queensland, so there you go. Moving on, let's talk about Kroger. They had a December 2020 data breach, and this is an update. I reported on it back then. I had to go back and look, but consumers whose information may have been compromised during Kroger's data breach could be eligible for a payment of up to $5,000 thanks to a recent class action settlement. So if you are a Kroger shopper during that time period of the breach, you may be entitled to compensation. Moving on, let's talk about Gravatar, whose motto is one avatar for everything, everywhere, meaning you basically can centralize all your avatars on all your platforms through them. And October 3rd, you know where I'm going with this, October 3rd of 2020, though, over a year ago, Gravatar was breached. They disclosed December 5th of 2021, 167 million profiles were hit, and we're talking email names, regular names, and usernames all compromised in there. So if you use Gravatar for that one avatar for everything and everywhere, here you go. And finally, and we have two finalies for you. There was a lot this week, but these are the big ones that we're going to be talking about here. The first one we're going to be talking about is Log4j. Now, I'm sure many of you don't know what this is. If you're in cybersecurity, oh, you're with me on this one. This one seems to be melting down the entire cybersecurity community online, and here's what's going on. The Apache Software Foundation has released fixes to contain an actively exploited zero-day vulnerability affecting the widely used Apache Log4j Java-based logging library that could be weaponized to execute malicious code and allow a complete takeover of a vulnerable system. Now, this is being tracked. This is the monikers of this are being tracked. I'm not going to get on the CVE technical side of this, but it's being tracked as Log4Shell or Logjam, and the issue concerns basically a case of unauthenticated remote code execution or RCE on any applications that are using this open source utility, and it's affecting versions Log4j 2.0 beta 9 all the way up to 2.14.1, and I will give you those version numbers because if you're listening to this, you better go check. Now, this bug has literally scored a perfect 10 out of 10 in the CVSS rating system, which is oh God, like holy cow, burn the world down. That's why everybody's melting down, because 10 out of 10 is a very hard score to catch. We don't, or basically rate, we never want to see a 10 out of 10 on CVSS ever, ever, ever. So that's obviously a huge problem. And from the advisory, and I quote, an attacker who can control log messages or log messages or log message parameters can execute arbitrary code loaded from LDAP servers, that's Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, like your Active Directory, for example, when message lookup substitution, is enabled. From Log4j 2.5.0, this behavior has been disabled by default. Now, here's why this is a big deal. If you're thinking, my God, Nick, you're kind of getting into the weeds here. Yeah, kind of, but it's really affecting everybody, and this is why. Log4j is used as a logging package in a variety of different popular software by a ton of manufacturers: Amazon, Apple's iCloud, Cisco, Cloudflare, Elasticsearch, Red Hat, Steam, Tesla, Twitter, video game platforms, the major ones like Minecraft. This is what we're talking about here. And in fact, in the case of Minecraft, attackers were able to gain remote code execution on Minecraft servers by simply pasting a specially crafted message into the chat box. Plus, this has a massive attack surface worldwide because it's literally used, Log4j is literally used by millions and millions of Java applications for logging. So this is a huge problem. You may have things on your phone, app-wise, that are using this that you don't necessarily know. This is why we update. This is huge. In fact, I got a notice for a product that we update pretty much daily to get new threat content, et cetera, et cetera. They actually plastered out a big warning as soon as we got into the console that said, you got to update now because this is also susceptible to Log4j. Fortunately, that server is not exposed to the world, but there you go. It affects everybody, me included. And there you go, Log4j. And finally, I want to actually bring this up because I think that I was actually thinking about doing this as a separate video and podcast on one of my dailies, but I thought this was actually a better place to put it, and that is Verizon, because it seems like Verizon is data breaching you. And it's somewhat legit, but they shouldn't be doing it. Now, here's what's going on. Verizon Wireless customers should probably take a look at your account settings. The publication reports that the carrier has automatically enrolled its customers into a new data collection program called the Verizon Customer Experience. Now, the company says in its support article that, quote, your participation in our customer experience programs helps us personalize our communications with you, give you more relevant product and service recommendations, and develop plans, services, and offers that are more appealing to you. Now, Verizon Wireless customers are obviously encouraged to provide even more data via the Custom Experience Plus program. So obviously, this is a huge thing. Custom Experience Plus, not Customer Experience Plus. I apologize for that. Now, Custom Experience Plus uses the info as well as your location data, and I quote, information about your Verizon FiOS services and customer proprietary network information that ranges from, and I quote again, information about the phone numbers you call or that call you and the times you receive these calls to inform about the quantity, type, destination, location, and amount of use your Verizon telecommunications and interconnected voice over IP, internet protocol voice over IP VoIP services. Now, the company notes that, quote, it may combine the interest we develop in the custom experience programs with other information we already use, to which basically it means that the support article doesn't fully cover the amount of personal data that Verizon's already collecting about its customers via the Customer Experience Plus programs, and all of these kinds of things. Basically, this is a massive information suck that Verizon is trying to get from you. More information about what Verizon collects and how it uses that data is buried in the company's privacy policy, which obviously is massively long. Now, the publication input also reports that Verizon automatically enabled customer experience for its customers when the program was introduced, leaving the program as supposed to be as simple as disabling it via the privacy settings page in the account settings. Now, here's why I have a problem with this, and I'm sorry for tripping over words. I was actually reading a lot of that verbatim. This is the issue that we've got. By default, the stance should be zero collection. And if there are things that are necessary, they should be clearly stated. And if they want to collect more from you, there has to be an opt-in, not an opt-out process, meaning you're automatically out. And if you want to join that, you've got to opt in. Here's the problem with that. Verizon, Facebook, Google, they all know that if you are made aware of these privacy collections that they're doing, you will opt out. You'll take the time. You're not going to want to opt in by default. And that's the problem that we've got here. We are trying to balance this massive data mining that is going on for profit for these companies. We're already paying them a ton of money for cell phone service or, anything else that we're doing in the case of Verizon, using Verizon. Maybe you've got fiber internet from them, whatever that is. You're already paying for that. But on top of it, they want your data. They want your information. They want to understand where you're going on your mobile phone, what apps you're downloading, what you're using, all these kinds of things to build a footprint and a profile for you so they can better advertise to you, but also turn that around and sell that to third parties as well. This is a massive, massive, massive multi-billion dollar, if not trillion dollar industry that is simply just running wild with our information. And until we really start codifying these laws that essentially give us recourse under the legal framework we live in, so Europe GDPR, United States hopefully gets GDPR, our version of it, whatever we call it, these are things that we really need to discuss. These are things we really need to understand. And that's why this is so unbelievably critical. Verizon and all of its competitors and the others shouldn't be able to do this without our direct consent. When we are signing up, it should be explained in plain English exactly what they collect on us, and then we have the ability to opt in if we want to give them more. A lot of us in this changing face of privacy, especially younger generations, may not care. And if it incentivizes it, meaning Verizon says, you know what? For $5 less every single month, we're going to collect absolutely everything you do. There's going to be a chunk of people that sign up for this. But they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, meaning you're paying full price and they want to collect this information as well. There has to be a balance. We have to figure this out. But the power to basically say what and who has our information should reside with us, and we should have to opt in, not opt out. And so those were your breaches of the week. If you're a Verizon customer, you were probably affected. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.